Okay, here we are. We're heading out of the transition area, off on the bike course of this Ironman distance triathlon in Kona. This is the Ironman distance triathlon, the World Championship. So we're going to preview this course. This is a nice simulated ride, and right now we're just getting warmed up. You can see we're at a stoplight here. We're going to make a left turn. Be careful. That's Pay and Save Hill, by the way. The athletes will run up that hill and back down that hill. But we're heading out on the bike course now. We won't worry about the run for this video, but I tell you what, it's a tough run. And here we are. You're following me. I'm riding on the bike. We're going at a nice pace, warming up. I'm riding my Kestrel tri-bike, and it's morning, so you can see it's sunny and humid. The winds haven't really kicked up yet, but they will once we're out on the Queen K Highway. But this is downtown Kona, basically, and over to the left is the Pacific Ocean, and where the pier is, and the bay, where the swim takes place, and all the festivities take place for the Ironman in Kona. So we're heading out right now. You're just warming up, small chain ring 15 on the back, and you're just getting your cadence up there in that comfortable range, 70 to 80 RPMs. If you're on a spinner bike, you can see we have a graphic. That is on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being a really low resistance and 5 being a high resistance. So you can play with that as you will, ride to your comfort level, or push the pace every once in a while. The other graphic here, small, that SM stands for small front ring / 15 tooth cog on the back. So know the gearing on your bike as you should, and you'll know the 15 tooth cog is typically in the middle of that rear sprocket cluster. And then we have our RPM range, and of course in the upper left corner we have our intensity range going from roughly 60 to 100%. Right now we're warming up somewhere around 70%, just getting warmed up, getting ready for our ride. This is a long ride, so it's over 5 hours. You can certainly break this up and do different sections of this course, or you can use it as your long day, get a chance to ride the entire course. So this bike course has changed over the years a few times. And this is the latest edition of the bike course. We videotaped this in 2010 during Ironman week. So this is the actual bike course as of 2010. First part of the bike isn't that difficult. There are some gradual climbs, and right now even we're going up a slight climb, and on race day you get out of the water and you are just so fired up. You've been swimming for 2.4 miles out there, and it's just an incredible swim. The current can be a factor, but it's just an incredible swim. You've probably watched the race many times on TV, but you can see the fish, you can see the turtles swimming underneath. The water's clear. It's pretty fantastic. And when you get out of that water and you're on your bike, right about now you're just fired up. You're happy to be out of the water at the very least, and you're on the bike and you're just feeling fresh, and you're just ready to hammer. Of course, that's a bad idea when you're doing the Ironman distance. You don't want to hammer that first part of the bike. That will really take a lot out of your legs, and we all have to remember this isn't a bike race, it's a triathlon. So you have to use the bike as a tool to get you ready to run strong. That's what the most successful athletes do. So here we are at the stop sign. You can just self-pedal if you wish. And then we're just going to go right through the light. And of course, on race day, they have all these intersections monitored, so you won't have to stop. It's a hot and humid day in Kona, as it always is. Probably temperatures in the mid to upper 80s, and humidity very high. Tropical island, but a real beautiful town. And if you ever have a chance to do the race, absolutely take that opportunity and get out there and race. And if not, just head on out there for training one day and just enjoy the race experience as a spectator, and bring your bike and get some training in. You can see the roads are nicely paved in this section near town. We're actually up on the Queen K right now. Just made the right turn. And it's a pretty busy road. I mean, it's a major highway with cars going 70 miles per hour, but the shoulders are huge. So you feel pretty safe out there despite the traffic. You can see the high clouds. Usually the clouds are over the mountains and they can be really dark at times, so you just know it's raining hard over the mountains. But we're down here by the coast, and it will rain, but you'll have these little micro flashes of rain. So you can be out there riding and it's actually a nice break to have it rain. You never get cold, that's for sure. So we're riding along here, still warming up. I'm going to recommend that you're in your small chain ring 15 on the back, and your resistance level on your spinner bike is around a 1 or a 2. And keep that cadence up, bring it up in the upper 70 range, 80 RPM range, and just get into a nice comfortable rhythm as you're on your bike on your trainer at home watching this right now. But again, let's pretend we're out there on the course. Let's simulate the ride. Right now you're looking through our fork-mounted cam, which is a pretty cool thing we just started doing. This is the first on-the-road virtual reality ride that we've used this camera, which is pretty cool technology. So you get a different perspective. You can see my hands there and the aero bar levers or shifters right there. And that's what it's going to look like if you ever get out there on the course. So we're cruising along, just keep that cadence up, keep that heart rate in that aerobic zone. It's a long aerobic endurance building workout for you. So just kind of keep everything in a moderate level, zone 2 or 3, throughout the entire ride. Every once in a while we might ramp it up a little bit, but this course is pretty straightforward. There are some climbs, actually up to Hawi is pretty significant, but for the most part they're just gradual climbs. The real difficulty in this course comes with the heat and humidity and then the winds. When they start picking up as the day goes on, they can be unbelievably severe. And this is Palani, this is Pay and Save Hill, and we're rolling down this now, as you can tell, and this is a fast descent. And we're coming up to a stoplight rather. You can see the ocean up ahead. So I'm sure if you've been to Kona to do the race, you're pretty familiar with all these scenes that you're seeing right now. As we head down the hill. And you can see the King Kamehameha Hotel up ahead. And making a left turn here, and we're doing a little out and back. A few miles up, a few miles back. And actually on the way out, it does kick uphill, so there is a grade that will be climbing, and then on the way back, you will be absolutely flying in your big chain ring on the front. But right now, if you're out there on the course, you're not going up the steep grade right now. It's still kind of flat, but as the course kicks up, I'll let you know. This is part of the run course as you run in, actually, and you're almost finished. It's one of those run courses where you can hear the announcer at the finish line, but before you get there, you have to make this detour, and it's kind of tough on the psyche, actually. You're almost done the race, but you actually have to run and finish on a leaky drive, which is just an amazing experience. I've done it several times in my career, and it is just an amazing experience. Hard to explain in words. But if you're a serious triathlete, I hope you get out to Kona one day and have the opportunity to do the race. So we're just cruising along here, still warming up. Let's keep that cadence in that upper 70, lower 80 RPM range. Some of you might be more comfortable in the mid 80 RPM range. But we're in our small chain ring, 15 on the back, and our resistance is on a 1 or a 2 on your stationary bike. You can see the wide shoulder. You know, even here there's still some shoulder, but you have to watch out, of course. These cars are parked and you want to make sure nobody opens their door on you. So you always have to be alert. If you're out there during Ironman week, the motorists, the locals are very familiar with the fact that athletes come to their town and they're fairly careful. So you have to respect the locals and keep in mind that they basically allow us to have this event. So you don't want to litter. You know, you have your gel packs, whatever. You want to make sure you pick those up and just really respect and obey traffic laws and be careful out there. Now you might be able to tell this grade kind of kicked up a little bit here, so we are working a little bit harder, and you can go to a different gear. Maybe go to your big chain ring 15 on the back right about now, and you can start working a little bit harder because you've been warming up for over 10 minutes. So now you can start pushing a slightly bigger gear and let your heart rate start rising a little bit, get into that steady state aerobic endurance effort that you're going to be in a lot today. Certainly you can shift gears and kind of keep it interesting on your own, or listen to my suggestions as we go through the workout. But the key here is to just kind of get an idea of what the route looks like there for the race, and to try to stay on my wheel. Right now I'm going about 35 miles per hour. No, I'm kidding, not really. If I'm lucky, I'm going 19 or 20 miles per hour on this training ride. And it was a long day. We actually rode the entire course, and it was a long day out there of video production, lots of stops and starts, changing film, changing batteries, changing cameras, all kinds of different things going on. But it was a great day. That's your vantage point again from the fork-mounted cam on my bike. You see the ocean there on the right, and we are climbing right now. We're going up this nice steady grade. I'm not sure what percentage grade it was. I'm going to guess it's probably 2 or 3%, so it's not that severe, but it still can kick you in the pants if you try to go really hard on it. So this is a time in the bike course or the bike or the race where you want to be very disciplined and maintain a very aerobic effort. You're racing, of course, so you're not just spinning as if you're out there on an easy recovery ride, but you're not hammering it either. Most age groupers should not do that. Now the pros are a different animal altogether, and they're trained to push the pace a little bit more even at the beginning. But even the top pros will tell you that they are a little bit conservative at the beginning of these races, and they don't let it all hang out. They can't, because if they did, they burn through all their matches. And the key with Ironman distance racing is to conserve those matches and use the bike as a tool to run well. And I always say the bike sets up your run. So what you do on the bike will dictate how well you run at the Ironman distance. So that's why conditioning is so important on the bike. You know, you've got to get your fitness level on the bike up really high. Higher your fitness level is on the bike, the higher it is, the better you'll be able to run off the bike. Even if your bike splits aren't super fast, if you're really well conditioned on the bike, you're just going to be able to run better. That's why you got to commit the time and the volume to the bike, because the bike sets up your run. So we're just cruising along here. You can see I'm down on my aero bars. and I'm riding my Kestrel and in a really comfortable aerodynamic tuck. I've got lots of fluid with me. It's going to be a hot, humid day, and your nutrition strategy should be very well planned prior to even doing this race, or any hot race for that matter, or any Ironman distance for that matter. But I'll be drinking frequently out there. Probably be consuming, I'd say, roughly 2 water bottles every hour in this training ride. They're 20 to 24 ounce water bottles, and I'll just be drinking consistently. And I'll probably be consuming around 250, 350 calories per hour, mostly in the form of gels and that kind of product, maybe some energy bars. But that consistent strategy of basically dosing yourself with fluids as well as with calories is a really solid strategy to implement. And then of course there's the electrolytes. In this race course, it's key and critical, especially if you cramp, if you're a heavy sweater, which I am, and I've had a lot of problems with that. As you can see, I'm standing up here, so stand up on the trainer, stretch the legs out. You can see it's a climb. It is a climb. So again, when you're out there on race day, you can't just hammer this part of the course. You got to be steady, nice and steady. Back to the electrolytes though. So if you're a cramper, there's nothing worse than getting into that situation where you start to cramp. So you just have to prepare yourself. It's all about prevention, because once you start cramping, you can always get out of it. You can always work your way out of it, but you're no longer going to be racing effectively. So at these hot Ironman distance or any ultra distance type endurance event, you've got to be focused on prevention, and that is a matter of pacing yourself properly throughout the day, which is very important, but also managing your fluid and hydration as well as your electrolyte balance. So you've got to make sure that you have all those things lined up. So here we are back on the course, and you can see I'm still pedaling along at a nice steady clip. We started shooting this video earlier in the morning, so you can see the sun's just ahead of us. But it is blazing hot already. So you're just riding steady, keeping your cadence up nice and high in that comfort range, your sweet spot, which is what I like to call it. Normally that's going to be around 80 some RPMs. For most people, around 85 or so. And you can still be in a gear inch that enables you to warm up. But if you want to simulate what we're doing here, you can see it is uphill. So go to your big chain ring and 15 on the back. Crank up your resistance knob a little bit on that spin bike to maybe a 2 or a 3, so you have a little bit more resistance. And you can see we are still climbing. Coming up here to the turnaround. I just signaled the camera guys who are on the motorbike behind me. Here we go, turning around, and now we're going downhill, and we're going to be motoring downhill. This is a very fast descent, so we were probably going, for this training ride effort, 17, 18 miles per hour up the hill, and I bet you we're going to be hitting 27 to 30 miles per hour, if not faster, going down the hill. So right now I want you to increase your cadence. I want you to go to a slightly lower resistance and really pick it up. Pretend you are going downhill fast. And if you have aero bars on the bike that's on your trainer right now, get down those aero bars. Practice riding in that aerodynamic position. You can see my hands right there grasping the aero bars. I'm in the big chain ring, probably the 12 or 13 right now, spinning it out because we are going downhill fast. So stay right with me. Good shot of the road there. Nice steady downhill effort here. Keep that cadence up. The coastline is now on your left side as you descend. This perspective is from the helmet cam, so a little different than from the fork-mounted cam. Back down on the aero bars, keep that cadence up, sweet spot, mid-80s. Now pace yourself. This is a really good fat burning workout, and you're just training your body to utilize fat as a primary source of fuel. So anytime you're on this bike for durations over 2 hours, you really tap into your fat stores. And this workout, if you go all the way through, we're looking at slightly over 5.5 hours. So that's a lot of effort, and that's a lot of fat burning that you'll be doing today if you do this whole workout. So make sure that you do pace yourself accordingly. And if one of your goals is to cut weight, as it is for a lot of endurance athletes to hit their ideal race weight, this is a good way to do it. Put these long rides in that are just steady state, aerobic paced efforts. It really does do a lot to train your body to utilize fatty acids more effectively as a source of fuel. And that's important for any long distance endurance athlete. So make this type of workout, the steady state aerobic zone 2, zone 3 workout, a normal part of your weekly training program. Professional athletes, elite age group athletes who have time to train and make it a priority will actually incorporate a couple of these types of workouts a week. They might not be 5 hours, they might be 2 or 3 hours, but you'll see a couple longer 2 to 3 hour rides each week in addition to maybe a longer 5 to 7 hour ride as they build their endurance pace. So we're cruising downhill, hitting pretty high speeds, probably around 30 miles per hour. You can see the wide shoulders once again. And this is just the start of the day. We still have to get out there on the Queen K Highway. And then it's a long day once you're out there, because you never know what's going to be out there for you. It could be incredible winds, it could be calm, and it could be super hot, or it could be comfortable. You never know. But I think for the most part you can count on it being windy and hot. But at least the views are nice, because you're at times looking out on the ocean and you're thinking, wow, this place is spectacular. Cruising along, a little bit more traffic here as we get towards the center of town. You can see the bike lane is clearly marked. That car let us go by. That was nice. Keep that cadence nice and steady in that sweet spot range for yourself, maybe in the mid 80 RPM range. Been on the bike for almost half an hour now, so I hope that you're hydrating. You've started to implement your nutrition strategy, because it is time to do that. Start drinking, start taking in some calories. Just be consistent with that. And don't do anything on race day that you haven't already practiced in training. That's a key point. Looks like we're going to make a right turn here. Here we go. And now we're going to climb the hill. Again, this is called Pay and Save for you old-time Ironman athletes out there. And I'm climbing out of the saddle to stretch my legs out. I think that guy recognized me because he said, "Hey, Coach Troy." So heading out, and this is an area, if you're doing the race, you have to be careful that you don't burn a match going up this hill, because there's a ton of people on this hill, and you're finally done this section of the bike and you're heading out on the highway, and it's really easy to get carried away with the enthusiasm from the crowd, and that's where you can start burning through your matches. So it's not smart to crank it. You've still got to stay reserved as you start climbing that hill. I'm again not talking about just soft pedaling, but you don't want to hammer it. If your threshold on the bike, say you can push 260 watts, you don't want to be at 400 watts going up this hill. That would be a bad idea. But we're still climbing. I'm still out of the saddle as I climb and just get comfortable and stretch my legs out. It's a good idea on this course because you can stay on the aero bars for most of it, which is good because you're in that aerodynamic tuck. The downside to it is you can get stiff in that position. So every once in a while, make sure you stand up, and I suggest maybe every 10 or 15 minutes, stand up, get out of the saddle, stretch your legs out, stretch your back out, and just kind of keep everything loose, because I'll remind you once again, the key to Ironman distance racing success is really the run. The bike sets up your run. So if you don't stretch out and you're not really prepared physically to run well off the bike, then you're defeating yourself to a certain extent. So make sure that you're stretched out well on the bike so that you can run well. Now we're on the Queen K. Okay, we just made a left turn, and this first section is pretty fast. There's a lot of downhill, and typically early in the morning you can get a nice tailwind heading out, especially if you're one of the earlier athletes. If you're an hour swimmer and you're a decent cyclist, you're going to be out there pretty early. The pros who are now leaving earlier in the morning get an even better opportunity because the winds are usually either dead or they're a really nice tailwind. Unfortunately for the slower athletes, it's, I think, a little bit tougher because as you head out on the Queen K and as the day progresses, the winds kick up, and typically, those winds are unpredictable. You never know which way they're going to be blowing, but typically on the way back from Hawi, you can really get a stiff headwind if you're later in the day. So keep that in mind. But right now you're cruising along because you're going downhill pretty fast, and you can see the lines go by us, and you can tell we are going fast. So again, keep it in your zone 2, zone 3 range, and keep that cadence in the mid 80 RPM range. Also on race day, be aware of the rules out there on the bike, because right about now you're roughly 30 minutes or so into the bike. You're starting to see some separation, so you're starting to ride with people that you'll probably be riding with a lot during the day. Of course, you'll be passing people will be passing you, but by now you're starting to get out of the bunch. You know, when you get out of the water, depending on where you are, you're getting out of the water with dozens of other people at the same time. If you're between that hour and say hour and 10-minute window, especially at a race like this that's so competitive, you know, you're going to be getting out with a lot of people, and you're just going to be congested out there on the bike course. So you need to be careful, because obviously you can get penalized for drafting if you're not careful. But this is a fast part of the course, so if you're going to get away from somebody or away from a pack, this is probably not the place to do it, because again, you're going downhill, and anybody worth their salt is going to be able to bridge a gap back up to you, especially if they're a cheater and they're trying to get on your wheel. But in any case, stay legal out there. Make sure you know the rules, whether it's 3 bike lengths, 4 bike lengths, or whatever they're recommending, because the rules tend to change every once in a while. Make sure that you know what they are. Make sure you know what blocking is. Make sure you know what drafting is, and just do your best to abide by those rules. Sometimes it gets hard because there are so many people of equal talent and abilities. So my advice is to err on the side of being maybe a little bit more conservative at the beginning, because as the race goes on, attrition sets in, and those people that were not careful early on start to fall apart, or they start to fall off pace, and you will pass them later, I promise. So if you want to back off a little bit, now's the time to do it. Still riding steady out here on the Queen K. The other thing I want to remind you of is this is part of the run course, so you'll be running out here and then back, and just basically getting towards the end of the race as you run back in. So this is a really special area. There's been some incredible race wins that have happened in this area. Of course, probably the best known would be the race between Mark Allen and Dave Scott, but there's been several others where this has been a defining moment as you run back up this hill, roughly 23 or 22 miles or whatever it was, back into town before the finish. But as you can tell, we're still going downhill, and again, if you have a quick tailwind, you will be cruising. Just don't burn that match. Keep it steady on race day, and even now, let's keep it steady, zone 2 or zone 3. Keep your cadence up in that comfort zone, your sweet spot range. Gearing right now, maybe big chain ring, 15 or so. If you're on that stationary bike, put that resistance at a 2 or 3. So this is one in our series of virtual reality videos, and we've done several of the iron distance bike courses out there, including Madison, Lake Placid, Louisville, and now we're doing Kona, and we also have some other cool rides. Oh, I forgot to mention Tempe as well. So we've got several videos like this where you can preview the bike course and basically train on the bike course in the comfort of your own home. So please make sure you check those out. Still a nice steady effort here. Still going downhill. Very slight grade. We're going to be coming back up this hill as we head back into town. You can see here I'm in a nice aerodynamic tuck. I have a nice steady cadence. My upper body is nice and relaxed and still, and my legs are doing the work. Keeping it steady. You see the road is still nicely paved here. First time I came out to Kona to do the race back in 1991. Boy, what a difference from then until now. The roads weren't paved well. Gosh, past the airport, I don't think they were paved well at all. I don't even recall if they had a shoulder. I think it was just a very small shoulder at the time. The lights in town weren't what they are now. There's just so many changes that have happened over the year, probably as a result of this race and the popularity of this event and what it's done for the town of Kona. But just so many changes over the years. But these roads are very pleasant to ride now. You just need to be mindful of traffic. Just holding steady here, that steady state effort. We're not really doing any high intensity intervals in this workout. That's not the point. That's not the intent. This is steady state aerobic endurance. So we're just working on getting into a groove, getting into that mindset where you're just grinding it out mile after mile. Nothing high intensity, nothing really super low intensity. Just kind of a moderate, easy to moderate workout where you're just getting the miles in. Training that aerobic energy system to its fullest extent. Nice steady effort. Stay on my wheel here. This is basically a 4-camera shoot. We've got our motorcycle behind me, rolling camera with Torrance driving and Mark holding camera, and then we've got our fork-mounted cam, and then we've got a helmet cam, and then I believe Torrance has a cam on his helmet, and then Mark has a handheld. So got a lot of different angles and perspectives on video when we shot this particular virtual ride. You see the clouds picking up a little bit in the distance. Of course, on race day, you pray for cloud cover. It makes the day a little bit more tolerable, especially on the run. But you're still out on the run course actually right now too. And that's quite a scene. When you're out there on the run and you've got basically 2,000 of the best triathletes in the world out there running with you, it's pretty intense, let me tell you. And you're pretty packed together. See a lot of people walking at this kind of race, but that's because of the heat and all the challenges. View from the helmet cam, just keeping it nice and steady. Looking down at the road, just pretend you're on your bike on the road there in Kona. If you're in your basement right now and it's cold or cool, turn that air conditioner off, turn that fan off. Let's pretend we're in Kona. Crank up that heat, put on a humidifier, get that heat up in the mid-90s, and then you start riding, and that's what it's really like out there. Better yet, put one of those really strong fans right in front of you and pretend you're riding into a headwind, because that really simulates the conditions. Or if you're a smaller rider, give yourself a nice stiff crosswind, and you'll see at times out there, even really experienced riders, especially coming back from Hawi, they will literally be leaning into the wind in order to stay upright. Looks like we have some cyclists up ahead here that we will be overtaking. Just went by that guy. Looks like these folks are out. They might be staying in one of the other hotels on the island, commuting by bike. But if so, that's a pretty long commute, because we're probably still another 20 miles from the Waikoloa, Hilton Waikoloa, and some of the other hotels along the coastline. But who knows? Might be a new secret way of training. They might have rocks in those backpacks, adding 50 pounds to their bike. You never know. Still keeping our pace nice and steady. I'm nothing really exciting here except just grinding it out. Keep that gearing where you're comfortable in that mid 80 RPM range and at that aerobic pace. You saw a sign there for the Natural Energy Lab. That's where the run goes. So you'd make a left back there to the Natural Energy Lab, run about 2 miles in, turn around and run 2 miles out, and that's basically the turnaround. Pretty interesting spot, because when you're running down in there on race day, it just gets hotter because it's at a lower elevation, and you run towards the coastline. And I've had a couple races where I've just felt like I was going to melt. In fact, one year there was one of those little kiddie pools, wading pools that you can step in. I said, screw this, I'm not stepping in it, I'm laying in it. Just basically laid in that wading pool. Let the water cool me down a little bit. I felt like $1 million when I got back up. But that's a tough area. That Natural Energy Lab just gets hot, and then on the way back out you're running uphill, so that adds some insult to injury. You know, you're already pretty wasted, tired from the long day in the heat, and then you're confronted with hitting that turnaround and running out basically uphill. Just cruising along here, just cruising along. Another cyclist heading back in. This is truly an international race. When you're out there, it's amazing, the athletes from various countries and the high level of competition. As you know, this is the World Championship, and it's just the best of the best are there, and people commit and sacrifice a lot to toe that line. So it's pretty inspiring to see some of the athletes that are out there. Steady, steady, steady. Make sure you're taking in some fluid, and make sure you're taking in some calories. You've been on the bike now for about 45 minutes or so in this training workout, so make sure you're managing your nutrition and your hydration. Right now I'm standing up, so why don't you do the same thing. Stretch your legs out a little bit. Get back into your rhythm. You can see some of the messages there in this white stone on the side of the road. Looks like a little bit of a climb here, so if you want to go to a slightly harder gear inch, why don't you do that? Let the cadence drop just a little bit, but again, you still want to maintain that aerobic endurance effort. Zone 2, Zone 3. And we're going by the airport now, so that's where everyone flies into. Never forget the first time I flew into Kona, coming in and just looking at that coastline, thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm here. This was back in '91. Small outside type of airport. Only a few airlines fly in and out. So you can see now why they call it a moonscape. You know, the landscape out there is just barren. It's pretty interesting. All that lava rock out there, lava formations with some vegetation out there. But there's no cover. There's no coverage from the sun. It's just wide open. And when those winds start kicking up along the coastline, it is unbelievable how challenging it can be to ride a bike. So if you're going to be doing this race one day, definitely make sure that your bike handling skills are up to par. Because when you get buffeted from a crosswind going 30 to 40 miles per hour, it can really scare you, believe me. Make you feel like you're getting blown off your bike. Just nice cruise along pace here. Again, still early on in the race, so if you're doing this race, you still want to be conserving your matches, keeping that intensity in check, keeping that aggression in check. That's the key to success at all long distance endurance races. Remember, it's a long day, and the way you feel right now, you know, only about an hour or less than an hour into the bike, it's going to be a lot different than the way you feel 3 hours from now. So you have to be smart about it. and burn those matches at the right pace. Here's the road again, the big wide shoulder. You can see a rumble strip right there. Obviously, you want to avoid that. Some people might like that actually, so whatever floats your boat. Just cruising along, you can see my cadence nice and high. See the traffic out there, you got to be careful. Traffic's going 60, 70 miles per hour at times. But it's you feel safe because of that wide shoulder. But it looks like the road to nowhere, doesn't it? It's out there. There's the fork mounted cam again. Try to stay down on those aero bars. Get used to riding those aero bars for long, extended periods of time. Gotta get your neck used to it, your lower back used to it, your arms used to it. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Right now you could be in your big chain ring on the front, your 15 on the back, keeping that cadence range in the mid 80 RPMs and that intensity level in that zone 2 to zone 3. So you're at least 10 to 15 beats under your lactate threshold heart rate, at least. And you're just basically cruising, feeling pretty comfortable, not really pushing the pace right now. Remember, this is a training ride, it's not race day. A lot of the same scenery here, and it will be for a while. Again, this is not the most exciting scenic course you'll ever do, but there are some people have a misconception that it's a flat course, and it's really not. There's a lot of climbing, lots of very modest grades, but what I would call false flats, where you're actually going up a hill that's 2 or 3% grade, but it's several miles long. So it doesn't seem like it's really a climb, but it is. You tend to hit those going up on the way back in. So I think it's definitely a harder bike course on the way back in than it is on the way out. And again, one of the things I think a lot of people do improperly is they push a little bit too hard on the way out because they feel so good and they are going so fast, and it tends to kind of draw you in, and you do tend to push a little bit more. But I want you to make sure that you conserve your matches at this point in the game and just keep yourself dialed back. Keep yourself dialed back. Just a reminder, hydration. We're coming up on roughly an hour or so of riding soon, so you want to make sure that you've already consumed plenty of fluid, 20, 30 fluid ounces perhaps, as well as some of your calories, especially on race day, because you have to remember, you get out of that swim and you've been working hard for however long it takes you to swim 2.4 miles. If you're an hour swimmer, that's an hour of hard work. If you're an hour and 30 minute swimmer, that's an hour and 30 minutes of hard work. And you don't have the luxury of fluid intake or calorie intake out there on the swim. So if you're not careful, you're running into a deficit right away on the bike. And I know that some coaches recommend that you give yourself time to settle, your stomach time to settle before you start eating and drinking. And actually in a race like Kona, that does make sense, only because of the salt water. So, you might need to wait 10 or 15 minutes while on the bike to kind of let your system settle, and then you can start your drinking and eating regimen. But in a lot of cases, you almost want to start almost right away. So when you get out on the bike, start taking in fluids and eating a little bit so you can compensate for all those calories and that energy you burned and those fluids you lost out there in the swim. Still just cruising along here. It looks like we've got a little bit of an uphill grade, so you can again be in your big chainring on the front and your 15 or so in the back. Just that barren Kona landscape up ahead. And it's hot too. It's in the mid to upper 90s probably right about now. But it's not a bad way to spend a day out on your bike there on the Queen K. Lots of legends born here on this road and at this race. This is kind of a peek behind the curtain, without the glamour. Not all the glamour, not all the glitz. Just steady training. Keep it steady. Again, the coastline is to your left, mountains are to your right. Looks like we're going downhill here, so you can pick up your cadence a little bit, maybe in that 90 RPM range. If you need to lower your resistance, you can. It's up to you as to what gearing you're using right now, but pick it up a little bit just to simulate your effort as we basically are going downhill, descending at a pretty rapid clip. Keep that intensity the same, just pick up the cadence, maybe into the 90 RPM range. And you can see I'm starting to shift a little bit. See my hands there, just looking for a comfortable hand position, changing it around a lot because it is a long day in the saddle and you have to keep yourself focused and interested. So the little things that you do keep you focused on the task at hand. Keep it steady, keep it steady. If you have to every once in a while, stand up, stretch your legs out. Make sure you're taking in your fluids, taking in your calories. We're almost at roughly an hour into the ride. You can see the sun starting to really come out, peeking through the clouds, which makes for a more difficult day out there. Okay, we're just cruising along here in your steady state aerobic effort, building that aerobic endurance. Keep that cadence up in that sweet spot range, probably in the mid 80 RPM range right now. And choose a gearing that enables you to do that at that aerobic heart rate or power output. Everyone's going to be different, so there's no point in telling you exactly what gearing to be in. For most people, though, big chainring on the front on the trainer and probably around your 15 tooth cog on the back will enable you to do that. Of course, that depends on your trainer resistance or tension. Wide open road. Stay right on my wheel. Going back over to the shoulder here so we don't get run over. It's actually great steady state training out here in Kona along the coastline because you just get this nice stretch of road. There are practically no turns for a while at least, and the road is really nicely paved, so it's just a steady state effort. You just have to be mindful of the vehicular traffic out there, as you do anytime you're out there on the bike. Coming up on some other riders here. So we've been on the bike now for a little bit over an hour, so assuming we're going probably around 18-19 mile per hour average pace. Actually, right now we're going a little bit faster because this is a pretty fast part of the course, just riding at a steady state effort, so it might be upwards of 20 mile per hour average speed. So you might have covered in the ballpark of 20 miles or thereabout. Hey guys, how you doing? On your left, on your left, on your left, move over. Alright, I'll go to your right. Of course, that's an illegal pass on race day, so don't do that. You have to pass on your left side. But this is training, so we have to make some changes every once in a while. I would have preferred to pass him on his left, but he didn't let me. But we're just cruising along. I'm up on the cow horns right now, not down on the drops, as you can see. But just maintain that nice steady effort. Steady state aerobic endurance training. That's what these workouts are all about. Other spin intervals workouts, you can crank out the hard intervals, VO2 max intervals, tempo intervals, threshold intervals, but for this workout, steady state aerobic endurance. And of course you can listen to my instructions, my voice instructions and training tips with the music in the background that we provide on this disc, or you can turn the music off and crank up your own music and listen to that in the background, which many people prefer. We have a music on, music off option in this DVD, and some of you might even want to shut my voice off because you just don't want to hear me anymore, and that's okay. Just crank up your own tunes and watch the landscape go by and pretend you're out there racing the bike course in Kona. Shifting gears a little bit. So we videotaped this in 2010, and of course electronic shifting is just now becoming popular, and I don't have that yet on this bike. But eventually you'll one day be watching this video perhaps, and you'll see mechanical shifting, and you'll be like, that's pretty retro. I'm sure one day everybody will have electronic shifting. But right now it's still mechanical. Those are my camera guys getting a different vantage point. And this is the helmet cam, perspective from the helmet cam. Steady state aerobic effort. Just dial it in. Keep it nice and steady. If you want to stand up, why don't you do that? Stretch your legs out a little bit. If you want to go to a slightly bigger gear, why don't you shift to a slightly bigger gear? Let the cadence drop just a little bit so you can pick up the intensity. It's up to you. So let's just keep it steady. Come on. We're going pretty fast right now, probably upwards of 23, 24 miles per hour. Like I said earlier, on race day it's typically easier heading out. You've got a lot of energy. Typically there's a tailwind or the wind is light early in the day, but on the way back you're on the same stretch of road because it's an out and back course out there, out and back bike course. So this really becomes monotonous later on in the day. Don't forget to hydrate. Don't forget your nutrition. So every 15 or 20 minutes, set your watch, do whatever you need to do to remind yourself you want to take in some fluid, take in some calories. You know, you're aiming probably for between 200 and 300 calories each hour. That's fairly common for most people. You might be a little bit different, but you can find that out through some experimentation. But most athletes will shoot for somewhere between 200 and 300 calories per hour. And also fluid needs vary from person to person depending on conditions, your sweat rate. So there's a lot of factors, and you would be well served to do some work to figure out exactly what your fluid needs are for any Ironman distance race, especially if it's a really hot race like it is here in Kona. I know for myself, I tend to cramp, or at least I used to, until I really dialed in my fluid needs. So I consume a lot of fluid just because I have a high sweat rate. In addition to that, I also consume a lot of electrolytes. And my feeling is that whatever it says on the bottle, the instructions on the bottle, whatever electrolytes you use, you probably want to double that dose, maybe sometimes even triple that dose. It won't hurt you, and it might really help you, especially if you're prone to getting cramps in your legs. So I'm in the aerodynamic position right now, tucked down there. You should be as well. Just stay on my wheel. Stay on my wheel. another cyclist on the other side of the road. Keep your intensity nice and steady. So if you're dialing in heart rate or power, I'd like for you to get probably within a 5 beat range, zone range for your heart rate, because that's what this is, just a steady state aerobic effort right now. And if you're using a power meter, try to keep that within about a 10 watt range, maybe 15 watt range. Just keep it steady. Keep it steady. And don't forget, we do have other videos in our collection of various race courses, iron distance race courses: Louisville, Placid, Wisconsin, Tempe, and now Kona. It's wide open out there. Lava fields, the Big Island along the Kona coast. You can sort of see the mountains far in the distance up ahead, and then on the left side you'll see the ocean. We're going pretty fast right now, going downhill. So if you want to go to an easier gear inch and reduce the resistance a little bit on your trainer, maybe pick up your cadence about 5 to 10 RPMs, maybe get up around 90 RPMs or so, that would be a good idea right about now. Bring it up a little bit, get that cadence up. Keep it steady, keep it steady. Do whatever you have to do to stay interested and engaged in the video, and that might mean putting this on your iPad or your computer and then watching a TV show next to it, or again listening to your own music, but do something to stay engaged as you're doing this workout and previewing this course. Keep it steady. Steady aerobic effort. We're really not changing our percent grade a whole lot. A little bit, as I mentioned, there are false flats out here, and it's hard to really get that perspective from video. You can when you're out on the bike riding it, but on video it's a little bit more difficult. So that's why we're just going to keep a pretty steady state for now. When we start climbing to Hawi, we are going to start using bigger gears and pushing tempo a little bit more, just because that's the nature of the ride there. But for right now, we're still just riding steady state. So keep that cadence up. Upper 80 RPM range would be good for you right now, 80, 90 RPM range. And just hang in there. Let's just keep it nice and steady. If you need to stand up every once in a while, do so. And you're good to go. So the scenic point's coming up. You just saw that sign. This is pretty cool if you ever have a chance to come out here to pull out and look over. Pretty great vantage point of the ocean. Now this is a pretty steep downhill too. This is a very fast part. So here I want you to go to it, an easier gear, lower resistance, and let's crank up your cadence to around 90 to 95 RPMs, okay? Because we're going downhill right now, probably around 28, 30 miles per hour. And again, you climb back up this hill and it's fairly significant, especially in the late stages of the race. So it'll really kick your butt on the way back. But right now you're going pretty fast downhill. So let's get that cadence up. Get that cadence up. Heading downhill, going pretty fast right now. Get that cadence up. Should definitely be down your aero bars in a nice aerodynamic tuck. Take full advantage of your aerodynamics. Now one thing is for certain, that whenever you do a hot race like the Ironman distance in Kona, as an example, of course there are many other hot races you'll be doing throughout the summer, but being acclimated to the heat is key, and so you've got to train in the heat. You've got to get your body used to being out there for extended periods of time in the heat and humidity. If you don't, you're not going to be able to race effectively in the heat. So you have to plan your training schedule so you can get outside and train in that heat. I'd say at least a couple days a week. And these longer aerobic endurance rides are very important in your Ironman distance preparation. Got to do them. Got to do them because they build the foundation for your fitness, and in particular the bike, as I've mentioned before, sets up your run. So these long bike rides, steady state aerobic endurance bike rides, build that endurance foundation that will actually enable you to run strong. You can be a fantastic runner, but if you don't have good bike legs, you're not going to be able to run near your potential out there. So build your fitness on the bike, and the run will follow. Just don't make the mistake of trying to race the bike, as so many people do. You see a lot of results, especially in the age groups, where athletes will have these fantastic bike splits, and then they get off the bike and they run, and their run is mediocre. And typically it's because they just put too much out there on the bike, and it's partly ego, it's partly bad strategy, but it's not a bike race, it's a triathlon, and you've got to hold back a little bit on the bike, put your ego in check. Somebody passes you on the bike, let them go. So I bet you'll see them later on when they're falling apart on that run, especially in a race like this where attrition is such a big deal because it's so hot and it's such a tough course with the winds. Look how barren it is out there in the lava fields. But still wide shoulder, still nicely paved, nice and smooth. Makes for a pretty fast bike. Top pros will go 422 to 425, somewhere in that range these days. And you'll see a lot of elite age groupers actually go around 5 hours, which is pretty darn fast. Keep it nice and steady. Maintain that aerobic endurance zone, upper zone 2, low to mid zone 3 heart rate. This is not meant to be a lactate threshold type workout. We have other workouts for that purpose. This is your long endurance ride. Just keep it nice and steady. Stand up every once in a while, stretch your legs out. I want to remind you to drink, eat, maintain that steady nutrition strategy every 15 or 20 minutes. So if one of your goals is to actually race in Kona, there's a lot that goes into it. A lot of dedicated hard work, strategy. Just in terms of qualifying, it's no easy task to get out there. It's so competitive now. You have to choose the right race, unless you're just a super talented age grouper who has that ability to qualify whenever they do race, as most people don't have that ability. You need to basically be fairly strategic in the qualifiers you choose and where they fall in your schedule, and to race at events that are suitable to your strengths. So there's a lot of races out there now, and a lot to choose from. Some flatter courses, some hillier courses, some race courses that tend to be a little bit cooler, and then others that tend to be a little bit hot. So it really depends, but you need to have a plan in order to get yourself to that level where you can qualify and actually toe the line in Kona. In order to check the schedule, make sure you check out www.ironman.com to see the race schedule, and make sure you sign up far in advance, because most of the races do fill out pretty quickly. But go into your training with a good plan. Training for Ironman is a year-round process, really. You're always keeping yourself in shape or getting yourself ready. But the actual training block for Ironman that's specific to a key event probably should be anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, depending on the athlete and the athlete's experience. You can't train for Ironman in terms of specific training year-round, or you'll burn yourself out. You'll get injured, overtrained. Some people try it. They think, okay, well, I have an Ironman in 8 months. I'm going to start doing 100-mile bike rides. That's probably not a good idea for most people. It's just too much volume, too far out. Usually with athletes I coach, I get in a good idea of their athletic history, what their experience is in the sport, and for most athletes, it's probably about a 10-week or so specific block that is focused on the Ironman distance race they are preparing for. And you can find these different training programs on my website at coachtroy.com. We do have basic training plans that you can download in that 12 to 16 week range, and we also have personalized coaching available, where you can work with one of my associate coaches, or you can work with me, and we will set up your strategy, develop your training plan and your training blocks, and then adjust them during the training process as needed, depending on how you're responding to the training plan. So if you're interested in something like that, please contact us. You can send me an email, troy@coachtroy.com, or just go to our website, www.coachtroy.com. But right now you're focused on this ride, and you're keeping it nice and steady aerobic, and you're just hanging in there, maintaining that nice steady effort. Your cadence range is in Yep, Waikoloa. Pretty fantastic resort. If you ever get a chance to get out there, check it out. Getting some nutrition out of my pocket, a gel or something, so make sure you're doing the same thing. Take in some calories. Hopping out of the saddle here, so why don't you do the same thing, get out of the saddle, stretch your legs out a little bit, and then right back down. Get back down those air bars. There you go. Keep it steady. Now, around this point in the race, you're still feeling pretty good. You've been on the bike for a little bit over an hour and a half, and you did your swim, 2.4 miles, and whatever time you would get out of the water, say it's an hour or say it's an hour and 30, whatever it is. So you've been out there for, well, let's say 2.5 to 3 hours exercising hard in the heat. Hydration is just so key and critical, as is that electrolyte balance concern. So you got to make sure you're managing that right now, but you're still feeling good. If it's race day, you're still feeling pretty good right now. and you're in the packs with all these different athletes. Obviously you're riding legal, but there's a lot of athletes around you because it's been fast so far, and there hasn't been a lot of separation. There's been some, of course, but people are still kind of bunched up on race day because there's so many people at the same level, and the bike course hasn't been challenging enough yet to really show separation or bring about separation. So you're still with a lot of other people. Hopefully you've been managing your pace well, so you haven't burnt through your matches or too many yet. You do have some athletes who will go out and just blaze that first 30 miles as if they're riding a 40K time trial and try to separate themselves, and that might be their strategy. Some of the pros will do that just to kind of get themselves some separation, especially if they know they need a gap on the bike in order to be competitive. But normally for most people that's not really a good idea, so you just want to keep yourself kind of dialed back. Separation does happen more on the way up to Hawi, and then when you get back to Hapuna on the way back, the inbound road on the way back in to the transition, which is, we're coming up on Hapuna here shortly. That's when that road on the way back, there's a lot of separation and selection, and people are starting to fall apart. And what you're doing right now, the pace you're going right now, will dictate whether or not you're one of those people that are falling apart on the way back in. So keep that in mind. How you feel right now at an hour and a half into the ride has a lot to do with how you'll be feeling in about 3 hours from now. Be smart. We're still riding a steady aerobic pace. We're going downhill right now. So if you want to crank up the cadence a little bit, you can do that. But just keep it steady. You're down your air bars and you're just keeping it steady. You can see right now we're going pretty fast. Probably in that low 22, 23 mile per hour range. Keep that cadence in that sweet spot range around 85 to 90 RPMs. Keep in mind that the iron distance, you don't want to be mashing a huge gear. You might push a bigger gear inch when you're doing a 40K time trial or an Olympic distance. But when you're talking about ultra distance racing like this, where you have such a long run, if you push a super big gear inch and just try to mash it out, that will really fatigue your legs and you won't have any legs to run. So you have to try to keep your cadence up and make yourself use more finesse than pure strength on that bike. Use a little bit more finesse. Take full advantage of your gears. The really good athletes will be shifting constantly, just always shifting, finding that sweet spot and keeping their cadence up there in that proper range, as well as their output, trying to keep a steady state power output as well. Still going pretty fast downhill here, so let's keep that cadence up. Keep that cadence up. The other thing I want to remind you is on a lot of your long rides, you need to do them on your own. I know it's fun to ride with other people, but when you're doing this kind of race, this kind of racing where you're out there by yourself for so long, you've got to learn how to maintain focus, because it's easy to get bored. It really is. But once you start losing focus out there on the bike and you start letting your mind wander, then you're no longer racing effectively. Your cadence drops, your speed drops, your heart rate drops. The really effective athletes are just in the moment at all times, constantly checking their gauges and reminding themselves of exactly what they need to do at that very moment. Because again, it's very easy to let your mind wander and start looking out at the ocean or look at the lava fields. And this course is not incredibly, it's a beautiful area, but there's not a lot of scenery other than the ocean and the lava fields to keep you engaged, not a lot of turns and those kinds of things. So it is kind of easy to just get in a zone and get zoned out and lose your focus. So make sure you're doing some of your long rides at home on your own and you're not distracted by other athletes. It's really important. You certainly can ride with other athletes and it's good, it's motivating, it's fun, it's social, but a lot of times you need to just get out there on your own. Same with long runs. Get out of the saddle right now to stretch your legs out. We're going up a little bit of a hill. Looks like there's some wind out there now too. As you can see, the trees are blowing a little bit, so starting to wear down. You know, a little bit of fatigue starting to set in as we start to approach 2 hours of steady riding on the bike. So hopefully you've been managing your nutrition well and your hydration, but you're out of the saddle, stretching those legs out. See the bike rocking back and forth a little bit as I climb out of the saddle, and with the fork mounted camera. I like to try to stand up every 10 or 15 minutes, no matter what, just to stretch my legs out and use slightly different muscle groups. I also move a lot around on the saddle, so I'll move up towards the nose of the saddle and back, especially when it comes to Ironman distance racing, because you need to subtly change the muscle groups that are engaged so you don't fatigue them as quickly. So little things like that. Some people even pedal with one foot for several revolutions and then go to the other foot. So they're basically giving a leg some rest while the other one's doing the work. So there's a lot of different strategies. The other thing you want to do every once in a while is just sit up and let your back stretch out. Giving up a few seconds here and there, unless you're racing to win it, which most of us are not, will really increase the chance of you having a good iron distance race day experience. Trying to stay down in those aero bars all day long and just maintain a certain cadence and not moving around, that's a great way to just get yourself wiped out. So move around a little bit on the bike and you'll feel a lot better, especially when it's time to transition to that run. Unless, of course, you're a pro and you're looking for a top 10 finish, then the pro level athletes, they will stretch it out and move around a lot, but they are incredible how they are disciplined and trained to basically stay in that aerodynamic position as much as possible, and their power output is just very high throughout the entire race. You'll see power outputs among the pros averaging around 270 to even 300 watts as they perform. Do out here in Kona, if you do come out, is wear plenty of sunscreen, especially if you're from the Northeast or Midwest or anywhere where you don't get a lot of sun exposure. It's an October race, and by then in a lot of parts of the country it's starting to cool down and you're wearing tights when you're going out to ride and jackets. So again, I mentioned before, heat acclimation is important. That's why a lot of athletes will try to get out to Kona a week or a week and a half in advance so they get some time to train in the heat. But if you can't do that, I recommend that you bundle up, try to put on some extra layers, and even spend some time in a sauna at the local gym, trying to build yourself up to 15 or 20 minutes at a shot. And I've heard of athletes that will get on the trainer and crank up the heat in their house and do long trainer rides with the heat turned on high as they prepare for Kona. but that's really important that you get yourself ready for the heat. But when you're out there, make sure you wear plenty of sunblock and plenty of coverage. See that sign right there? Kauai High is coming up. Plenty of coverage. One year, I guess it was the mid 90s when I did Kona. This is in the old days when we used to race in Speedos, believe it or not. But it was a year that super sunny, and I had, coming from the East Coast where I used to live, just inadequately prepared for the sun, and I didn't have very much sunscreen on, and I was so sunburned that it was just a horrible experience. I think I was in shock. I was so sunburned. So I learned my lesson, and now when I race, I try to get as much coverage as possible. And there's a lot of clothing technology out there now, including arm coolers and leg coolers, and as you know, compression wear that people are wearing that not only work in terms of compression and the benefits of wearing compression apparel, but also they help to block the sun and reflect the sun off your body. So take advantage of all those different technologies when you're out racing in Kona. We're going downhill right now. You can see the stretch of road ahead tilts down, so bring that cadence back up, maybe in that 90 RPM range. Just keep in mind, whenever we go downhill, we head back on the same road. So you'll be heading back up this hill. So if it seems easy now, it's going to get a lot harder on the way back in. It's easy to get complacent too, because you're still feeling pretty strong right now, and you're feeling good, and you've got a little bit of a tailwind, and you're looking at your average bike's time, your average mile per hour pace, and you're like, wow, I'm cruising, I'm gonna break my PR, I'm just kicking butt. But then you kind of get a dose of reality when you start climbing up to Hawi and you've got a stiff headwind and you're going 11 miles per hour. But right now you're just keeping it steady on your trainer at home. Mid 80 RPM range. Still heading downhill here, and we're going pretty fast, as you can probably tell. I'm going up a slight grade here, so let's slow it down a little bit, slow your cadence down, go to maybe a little bit more resistance. So big chain ring on the front, pop it down to your 15, maybe 13 on the back. You can tell we're going a little bit slower as the road kicks up slightly. Not a big deal. Again, these are just very small changes in grade, but they add up over time. Right now I'm staying arrow. Sometimes I prefer to stay in that arrow position, tuck, even at slower speeds, and then I'll sit up after a while. But still arrow right now, even though we're going a little bit slower.